The Starliner Celestial Horizon was the kind of ship that made you feel poor just by looking at it. Troy wiped his greasy hands on his pants as he walked through the boarding tunnel, still not quite believing his company had actually paid for a first-class ticket this time. After 3 months fixing broken reactors in the armpit of the galaxy, he figured he'd earned it. The first-class cabin smelled like expensive leather and something floral he couldn't name. Soft music played from hidden speakers. The seats were practically beds with enough legroom to do jumping jacks if you wanted. Troy threw his duffel bag into the overhead compartment and was about to sit down when he heard the commotion from economy class. "Sir, you need to stay in your assigned seat," a flight attendant was saying, her voice tight with frustration. "I am trying," came a deep, rumbling reply that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Your seats were not designed for my kind." Troy leaned into the aisle and saw him. The Draconian was massive, easily 8 feet tall, even hunched over. His scales were a faded bronze color, dulled by age, and his wings were folded tight against his back, but they still pressed against the narrow walls of economy. One wing had a huge scar running through it, the kind that never healed quite right. He was trying to squeeze into a middle seat between 2 human passengers who looked absolutely furious. "This is ridiculous," the woman on the left snapped. "I paid good money for this flight. I shouldn't have to sit next to that." "Ma'am, all passengers have the right to," the attendant started. "I don't care about rights. Look at him. He's taking up half my space." The dragon said nothing. He just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, trying to make himself smaller. Troy noticed the medals pinned to his worn jacket. Military decorations. Old ones, from the Dissolution Wars, back when the Draconians still had an empire. Troy had learned about those wars in school. Humanity had been on the winning side, part of the coalition that broke Draconian power forever. That was 40 years ago. This old soldier had probably fought in battles that killed thousands. And now he was being yelled at for having the audacity to buy a ticket on a public transport ship. Something in Troy's gut twisted. His grandfather had been military too. Army engineer, served 3 tours on the outer colonies. Grandpa Joe used to say that you could tell everything about a person by how they treated folks who couldn't fight back anymore. Troy grabbed his bag and walked into economy. "Excuse me," he said to the flight attendant. "I've got a first-class seat up front. I'd like to give it to him." He pointed at the dragon. Everyone in the surrounding seats turned to stare. The dragon's golden eyes widened. "Sir, that's very generous, but—" "No buts. I'm offering. Is he allowed to take it or not?" The attendant blinked, clearly not trained for this situation. "Well, yes, technically any passenger can accept a voluntary seat exchange, but—" "Great. Sir?" Troy looked up at the dragon. "You want to move up to first class? Trust me, those seats are way more comfortable." The dragon stared at him for a long moment. Up close, Troy could see how old he really was. Scales cracked around his eyes. His claws were worn smooth. This wasn't some young warrior. This was a grandfather just trying to get somewhere. "I cannot accept charity, human," the dragon said quietly. "It's not charity. It's just good sense. You're what, like 300 pounds heavier than me? You need the space more. Plus, I spent 3 months in zero-G maintenance shafts. Trust me, economy class is luxury compared to that." Troy stuck out his hand. "Name's Troy Brennan. I fix reactors for a living." The dragon looked at Troy's hand like it was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Then, slowly he reached out and clasped it. His grip was gentle despite the size of his claws. "General Thorvin Ashwing," he said. "Retired." "Well, General, let's get you settled upstairs before the lunch service starts. I hear they've got actual steak up there, not that printed stuff." As they switched seats, Troy heard the whispers starting. The woman who'd been complaining loudest said something to her husband about dragon sympathizers. A businessman in a gray suit shook his head in disgust. But Troy also saw a young couple smile at him, and an older man gave him a subtle nod of approval. The flight attendant helped General Thorvin get settled into the spacious first-class seat. His wings finally had room to unfold properly, and for the first time since boarding, the old dragon's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you," he said simply. Troy shrugged. "Thank you for your service, General. Whatever side you fought on, war's still war." As Troy headed back to economy and squeezed into the middle seat the dragon had vacated, still warm and way too small, he caught sight of Thorvin through the cabin divider. The old soldier was staring out the window at the stars, and if Troy wasn't mistaken, there was something shiny in those golden eyes. Troy settled in, pulled out his tablet and smiled. Yeah, economy class sucked. But somehow he felt like he was flying first class anyway. Troy was halfway through a terrible mystery novel when a shadow fell across his seat. He looked up to find General Thorvin standing in the aisle, holding 2 glasses of something amber-colored. "The steward insisted I take these," the dragon said, his voice uncertain. "I do not drink alone. Would you join me?" Troy glanced at the expensive-looking crystal glasses. "General, that's probably 50-credit whiskey. You sure you want to waste it on me? After what you did, it would be an honor." Thorvin gestured to the empty seat beside Troy. The previous occupant had apparently switched seats to get away from the lizard sympathizer. "Their loss." Troy took 1 glass. The whiskey was smooth, the kind that warmed you from the inside without burning. "So, where you headed, General?" "Barrier Station. There is a memorial service for my old squadron." Thorvin stared into his glass. "I am the last one left to attend." "I'm sorry. That's rough. It was a long time ago. 43 years since the Battle of Kelvin's Gate. Sometimes it feels like yesterday." Thorvin took a slow sip. "We were told we were fighting for honor. For the glory of the Empire. We believed it until we didn't." Troy had never heard a Draconian talk like this. In school they'd always been painted as these proud, aggressive conquerors. But the old soldier sitting next to him just seemed tired. "My grandfather fought in those wars," Troy said. "Army Corps of Engineers. He used to say the worst part wasn't the fighting. It was coming home and realizing half of what they'd told you was lies." Thorvin's eyes met his, surprised. "Your grandfather was wise. What was his name?" "Joe Brennan. He passed away 5 years ago." "Then let us drink to Joe Brennan and to all the soldiers who saw through the lies." Thorvin raised his glass. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Troy's curiosity got the better of him. "Can I ask you something? What do you do now? I mean, after the military?" Thorvin's laugh was bitter. "I survived. The Empire dissolved. Our pensions were cut to almost nothing. I do consulting work when I can find it. Mostly I am forgotten." He paused. "I designed ships once. Warships, yes, but also cargo vessels, colony transports. I was good at it." "Wait, you're an engineer?" Troy sat up straighter. "I was. The Draconian military academies trained us in all aspects of ship design. When you might need to repair your vessel in the middle of a battle, you cannot afford ignorance." Troy grinned. "No kidding. I'm a fusion mechanic. Work on drives mostly. Spent the last contract fixing a Mark IV reactor that the original crew had basically held together with duct tape and prayer." For the first time, Thorvin's expression lightened. "A Mark IV? Those are temperamental beasts. The quantum stabilizers constantly drift out of alignment." "Yes. Everyone tells me it's impossible to fix them without a full replacement, but if you just recalibrate the magnetic bottles first, the stabilizers naturally realign." "Exactly." Thorvin's tail swished with excitement, nearly knocking over Troy's drink. "Sorry? I have not talked shop with another engineer in years." They dove into technical discussions, trading stories about impossible repairs and stupid design choices. Troy told him about the time he had to crawl through a coolant pipe full of ice just to reach a broken relay. Thorvin described jury-rigging a hyperdrive with parts from 3 different incompatible systems while under enemy fire. Other passengers started to notice. Some ignored them. Others whispered and pointed. Troy saw a middle-aged woman named Beth from a few rows up smiling at them. She'd been reading earlier, but now she was clearly listening in. "Excuse me," she called over. "Did you just say you fixed a hyperdrive with mismatched parts? That shouldn't be possible." Thorvin turned to her. "It should not be. But when the alternative is dying in space, you find motivation." Beth moved closer, intrigued. "I'm a student. Engineering physics. That's exactly the kind of problem-solving they say is impossible in textbooks." "Textbooks are written by people who never had to make do with what they had," Troy said. "Real engineering is about making things work, not making things perfect." They talked for hours. Beth asked questions. Thorvin answered with the patience of a natural teacher. Troy chimed in with practical examples. At some point, a couple of other passengers drifted over, drawn by the conversation. A young mechanic named Kevin. An older woman who'd worked on colony ships. Even the businessman in the gray suit started listening, though he pretended not to. The flight attendant came by with dinner carts. She paused, looking at the small crowd gathered around Troy and Thorvin. "Everything all right here?" she asked nervously. "Everything's great," Troy said. General Thorvin here was just explaining why the Stellardyne engines are overrated garbage. "Because they are," Thorvin rumbled. "Over-engineered, fragile, and impossible to maintain in the field. But they look impressive on specification sheets, so corporations love them." Kevin laughed. My boss would kill me for saying it, but you're absolutely right. As the crowd dispersed for dinner, a man pushed through. He was Centauri, wearing expensive clothes and an expression of pure disgust. Troy recognized him from first class. His name was Vance or Veller or something like that. This is pathetic, the Centauri sneered. A human playing friends with a broken-down lizard. Do you have any idea what his kind did during the wars? The colonies they burned. Troy stood up slowly. He wasn't a big guy, but he'd learned a long time ago that confidence mattered more than size. I know exactly what happened in the wars. Both sides did terrible things. But you know what? The general here is trying to move forward. You're the one stuck in the past. How dare you? How dare I what? Show basic respect? Yeah, I'm a real monster. Troy stepped closer. Now why don't you go back to first class and let us broken down folks have our conversation in peace? Veller's face flushed purple, but he turned and stalked away. Thorvin placed a heavy claw on Troy's shoulder. You did not need to do that. Yeah, I did. Guy was being a jerk. Troy sat back down. Besides, you were about to explain the cooling system problem with Stellardyne reactors. I'm not missing that for anything. The old dragon's laugh was genuine this time, warm and deep. You are a strange human, Troy Brennan. I get that a lot, General. I get that a lot. Troy was dreaming about his grandfather's workshop when the alarm jolted him awake. Not the gentle chime that meant turbulence or a course correction. This was the emergency klaxon, the sound that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. Red lights flooded the cabin. Passengers jerked awake, confused and frightened. The intercom crackled to life, and Troy heard genuine panic in the captain's voice. All passengers, this is Captain Hayes. We have a critical situation in the main engine room. Please remain calm and stay in your seats. Crew, initiate emergency protocols. Troy's stomach dropped. Critical situation in the engine room. On a ship like this, that could only mean one thing. The fusion reactor. He unbuckled and stood up, ignoring the flight attendant who immediately rushed over. Sir, you need to stay seated. I'm a fusion mechanic. If something's wrong with the reactor, I can help. Sir, this isn't a maintenance issue, this is... The ship shuddered violently. Someone screamed. The lights flickered. Troy didn't wait for permission. He pushed past the attendant and ran toward the engine section. Behind him, he heard heavy footsteps. Thorvin was following. The engineering deck was chaos. Crew members ran back and forth with tablets and toolkits. In the center of it all stood the chief engineer, a four-armed Viridian named Quentin, shouting orders at his overwhelmed team. I need a full diagnostic on the containment field. Where's my reading on the plasma temperature? Someone get me those numbers now. Troy pushed through to the main console and looked at the readouts. His blood went cold. The reactor temperature was climbing fast. The containment field was fluctuating. And the automatic shutdown protocols weren't responding. How long? He asked Quentin. The Viridian spun around. Who the hell are you? Troy Brennan. I'm a licensed fusion mechanic. How long until breach? Quentin's four arms gestured frantically at the screens. 3 hours. Maybe less. The cascade is accelerating. We've tried everything. The emergency protocols won't engage. It's like someone ripped out the safety interlocks. Let me help. I've worked on systems like this. This is a Firestorm-class military reactor. Quentin snapped. Top-of-the-line draconian tech retrofitted for civilian use. Unless you have clearance and training on draconian military systems, you'll just make things worse. Actually, Thorvin's deep voice cut through the noise, I designed the Firestorm class. Everyone stopped, turned, stared at the old dragon standing in the doorway. You're lying, Quentin said, but his voice was uncertain. Firestorm Mark 7, commissioned in 2187, primary reactor for Dreadnought-class warships. Thorvin moved to the console, his eyes scanning the data with practiced ease. Triple redundant containment, quantum stabilization grid, and a manual override system that requires someone to physically enter the reactor core to reset it. Quentin's arms dropped. How could you possibly know that? Because I am General Thorvin Ashwing, former Director of Naval Engineering for the Draconian Fleet. And that reactor is about to kill everyone on this ship unless we act quickly. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Chief Quentin, status report. Quentin grabbed the comm. Captain, we have a situation. The reactor needs a manual reset from inside the core. The access shafts are only 18 inches wide. None of my crew can fit. Troy looked at the schematics Thorvin had pulled up. The path to the reactor core wound through a maze of pipes and conduits, most of them superheated. It would be like crawling through an oven while threading a needle. I can fit, Troy said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Absolutely not, Quentin said. You're not crew. The liability alone. I don't care about liability. I care about not dying in a fusion explosion. Troy met Thorvin's eyes. Can you talk me through it? The old dragon studied him for a long moment. It will be dangerous. The radiation levels alone. I've been inside hot reactors before. Never one this big, but the principle's the same, right? Troy, if you make one mistake, one wrong connection, the reactor will not cascade. It will simply explode. Instantly. Then I won't make a mistake. Troy stripped off his jacket. Tell me what I need to do. The captain arrived, a stern woman with gray hair and 3 decades of command experience in her eyes. She looked at Troy, then at Thorvin, then at the countdown on the screen. 2 hours and 43 minutes. This is insane, she said. Captain, with respect, we're out of sane options, Quentin replied. Captain Hayes closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with decision. Do it. But General, you're directing every move. One wrong step and I'm pulling him out. Understood. Understood, Captain. They suited Troy up in a radiation suit, though everyone knew it wouldn't do much good if he got stuck in the really hot sections. Beth appeared with a camera drone. I'm documenting this, she said. If something goes wrong, at least we'll know what happened. Kevin handed Troy a toolkit. These are compact. Should fit through the tight spots. Troy strapped on the kit and looked at the access hatch. It was barely wider than his shoulders. Beyond it, he could see the glow of superheated metal. You ready? Thorvin asked, his clawed hand on Troy's shoulder. Not even a little bit. Let's go anyway. Troy climbed into the shaft. The heat hit him immediately, even through the suit. He could hear Thorvin's voice in his ear through the comm link, calm and steady. Forward 10 feet. You will see a junction. Take the left path. Troy crawled. The metal beneath him was hot enough to feel through his gloves. Sweat poured down his face. The passage was so narrow he had to exhale to squeeze through some sections. Good. Now you should see a panel marked with draconian symbols. 3 diagonal lines. Do you see it? Yeah, I see it. Open it. Carefully. The pressure release will be sudden. Troy popped the panel. Steam erupted, scalding even through his suit. He bit back a scream. Troy? Troy, report. I'm okay. Just steam. Panels open. Excellent. Now inside you will see 4 crystalline cores. They should be glowing blue. What color are they? Troy peered inside. 3 blue, 1 red. There was a pause. When Thorvin spoke again, his voice was ice cold. That should not be possible. The cores do not change color unless someone manually overrides them. Troy, this was not an accident. Someone sabotaged this reactor. On the engineering deck, Quentin pulled up security footage. They watched as a figure in maintenance coveralls accessed the reactor room during the night cycle. The footage was grainy, but the build was distinctive. Centauri. That's Veller, Beth breathed. The guy from first class. Captain Hayes grabbed her comm. Security, locate passenger Veller immediately. He's to be detained for questioning. In the shaft, Troy's heart pounded. Thorvin, sabotage or not, can we fix it? Yes. But it will be more complicated. Listen carefully. Troy's hands moved through the complex sequence Thorvin described. Disconnect the red core. Reroute power through the secondary grid. Realign the magnetic bottles. Each step had to be perfect. The ship shuddered again. The temperature gauge on Troy's suit climbed past 400 degrees. How much time? He asked. 18 minutes, Quentin's voice said grimly. Troy worked faster. His hands shook from the heat and adrenaline, but he forced them steady. Everything his grandfather had taught him about staying calm under pressure, every impossible repair he'd ever pulled off, it all came down to this moment. Final step, Thorvin said. You need to manually engage the containment field. There is a lever. Pull it down until you hear 3 distinct clicks. Troy found the lever. It was hot enough to glow. He grabbed it through his gloved hands and pulled. 1 click. 2 clicks. The lever stuck. It's not moving. Thorvin, it's stuck. Pull harder. You must complete the sequence. Troy braced his feet against the walls and pulled with everything he had. His muscles screamed. The lever groaned. 3rd click. The reactor hummed. The red glow faded. The temperature readings began to drop. Containment stable, Quentin announced, his voice shaking with relief. Reactor temperature decreasing. We're safe. The entire engineering deck erupted in cheers. Troy collapsed in the shaft, gasping for air. Troy? Troy, are you all right? Thorvin's voice was urgent. Yeah, I'm good. Just give me a minute to crawl back out. When Troy emerged from the access shaft 20 minutes later, his face was bright red from heat exposure and his hands were blistered. But he was grinning. The entire crew stood watching. Someone started clapping. Then everyone joined in. Captain Hayes stepped forward. Mr. Brennan, you just saved 3,000 lives. Troy shook his head, still catching his breath. Wasn't just me. General Thorvin did the hard part. I just turned the wrenches. Thorvin helped him to his feet. You risked your life, human. That is not something I will forget. Yeah, well? Troy winced as the medic started treating his burns. You bought me whiskey. I figured I owed you one. The captain's expression darkened. Now someone needs to explain how a passenger managed to sabotage a military-grade reactor. And where the hell is Veller? The medic was wrapping Troy's blistered hands when the second alarm went off. This one was different. Sharper. More urgent. Security breach in Escape Pod Bay 3, a voice announced over the intercom. All security personnel respond immediately. Captain Hayes' face went pale. He's running. Quinton, seal off that section now. Troy stood up, ignoring the medic's protests. Captain, if he gets to those pods. I know. Hayes was already moving, speaking rapidly into her comm. All units converge on Bay 3. Authorization to use force if necessary. That man tried to kill everyone on this ship. Troy and Thorvin followed the captain through the corridors. Other passengers had emerged from their cabins, confused and frightened by the alarms. Beth was there too, her camera drone hovering behind her, still recording everything. They reached the escape pod bay just as Veller was climbing into pod 7. The Centauri's expensive suit was rumpled, his face slick with sweat. When he saw them, his expression twisted into something ugly. Stay back. He pulled out a small device. Troy recognized it immediately. A plasma cutter, the kind used for emergency hull repairs. In the wrong hands, it was a weapon. I'm leaving this ship, and none of you can stop me. Why? Captain Hayes kept her voice level, but her hand hovered near her sidearm. Why would you do this? Why try to kill 3,000 innocent people? Veller laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Innocent? You humans are a plague on this galaxy. 30 years ago, you were barely capable of faster-than-light travel. Now you're everywhere. Taking our jobs, our contracts, our place in the order of things. So you decided to blow us all up? Troy stepped forward. That's insane. It's necessary. Don't you see? If humans keep integrating, keep making friends with washed-up has-beens like this dragon, you'll take over everything. Someone has to stop you. Thorvin's voice rumbled like distant thunder. I fought in a war built on that same logic. Fear of what others might become. It destroyed my people's empire and killed millions. And you learned nothing from it. I learned that power belongs to those strong enough to take it. Not to grease monkeys and broken old lizards playing engineer. Veller activated the plasma cutter. The blade glowed white-hot. Now step aside. Troy's mind raced. The plasma cutter could slice through the hull if Veller wanted. One wrong move and they'd all be sucking vacuum. But if Veller made it to that pod, he'd escape. And something told Troy this wasn't just one angry Centauri acting alone. You said, someone has to stop you, Troy said slowly. Not, I have to stop you. Someone. Like you're not working alone. Veller's eyes flickered. Just for a second, but Troy caught it. There are others, aren't there? This wasn't just about destroying one ship. You're part of something bigger. Shut up. Veller raised the cutter higher. I said step aside. That's when Thorvin moved. For an old dragon, he was shockingly fast. His tail whipped out like a steel cable, catching Veller's wrist. The plasma cutter went flying, deactivating as it clattered across the deck. Veller stumbled backward, reaching for something in his jacket. A pistol. Troy didn't think. He just reacted, diving forward and tackling the Centauri. They hit the ground hard. Veller was stronger than he looked, thrashing and kicking. His fist caught Troy in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Then Thorvin was there, one massive claw pinning Veller to the deck with the gentleness of someone who knew exactly how much pressure to apply. Not enough to crush, but enough that struggling was pointless. It's over, Thorvin said quietly. Security arrived moments later, surrounding them with weapons drawn. They pulled Veller to his feet and restrained him. The Centauri was still shouting as they dragged him away. You think you've won? This changes nothing. Others will finish what I started. Humanity's rise will be stopped. Captain Hayes watched him go, her expression grim. Get him to the brig. Maximum security. And I want a full search of his quarters. Find out who he's been communicating with. Troy sat on the deck, breathing hard. His ribs hurt where Veller had hit him, and his burned hands were screaming in pain. Thorvin offered one claw and pulled him to his feet with surprising gentleness. You should rest, the old dragon said. You've done enough. Not yet. Troy looked at the captain. Ma'am, we need to make sure there aren't any more surprises hidden in the reactor. If Veller had helped, they might have planted backup sabotage. Hayes nodded. Quinton, take Mr. Brennan and General Thorvin back to engineering. Do a full sweep. I want every system checked twice. For the next 6 hours, Troy and Thorvin worked alongside Quinton's engineering crew. They checked every circuit, every connection, every backup system. Kevin and Beth helped, following their instructions. Even some of the passengers who had engineering backgrounds volunteered. Troy found himself working in perfect sync with Thorvin. The old dragon would identify a potential problem, and Troy would understand immediately what needed to be checked. It was like they'd been working together for years instead of days. Here, Thorvin pointed to a junction box. This access panel has been opened recently. The seal is broken. Troy carefully opened it. Inside, tucked behind the main power relay, was another device. Small, sleek, and counting down. 3 hours and 17 minutes remaining. Everyone out, Troy said quietly. Now. What is it? Quinton asked. Backup plan. Vela must have set this before he sabotaged the main reactor. If we'd stopped the first one but missed this. Troy swallowed hard. This is enough explosive to crack the ship in half. The deck cleared. Only Troy, Thorvin, and Captain Hayes remained, watching from behind a blast shield as Troy carefully examined the device. Can you disarm it? Hayes asked. I don't know. This isn't reactor tech. This is military-grade demolition. Troy looked at Thorvin. General, you recognize this? Thorvin studied it carefully. Yes. It's old draconian military. A ship-scuttling charge. We used them to prevent our vessels from being captured. He pointed with one claw. There. That panel. Behind it is the trigger mechanism. How do I disarm it? You don't. It's designed to be tamper-proof. If you try to disable it conventionally, it will detonate immediately. Troy felt ice in his stomach. So what do? We jettison it. The explosive is powerful but contained. If we can get it off the ship before it detonates. Thorvin was already working the calculations. Put it in an escape pod. Launch it at maximum velocity. The explosion will be far enough away to avoid damaging the ship. How much time to program the pod and get clear? 8 minutes. Maybe 9. Troy looked at the countdown. 2 hours and 54 minutes. Plenty of time. Except, the pod's launching system was damaged when we fought Veller, Hayes said grimly. It'll have to be launched manually. From inside the bay. How long to launch manually? 90 seconds. But you'd be exposed to the pod's engine wash. 2nd-degree burns minimum. Troy and Thorvin looked at each other. Then Troy started laughing. He couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all. What's funny? Hayes asked. I just crawled through a superheated reactor shaft. What's a little more fire? Troy was already moving toward the pod bay. Let's do this. They loaded the explosive into pod 12, the one furthest from any occupied sections. Thorvin showed Troy exactly which sequence to use for manual launch. It was simple, really. Disengage the safety locks, override the automatic systems, and pull the launch lever. You'll have 90 seconds from the first override to clear the engine wash zone, Thorvin explained. The burn radius is approximately 20 feet. Troy looked at the distance. 25 feet to the blast doors. If he ran full speed, if nothing went wrong, he'd make it with maybe 5 seconds to spare. Piece of cake, Troy lied. He started the sequence. The pod systems came online with a whine. Warning lights flashed. Troy disengaged the safety locks one by one. His burned hands made every movement agony, but he didn't stop. Final lock. Override engaged. The pod began its launch cycle. Troy grabbed the lever and pulled. The pod's engines ignited with a roar. Heat washed over him like a physical force. Troy ran. His legs pumped. The blast doors seemed impossibly far away. The heat grew more intense with every second. Thorvin stood at the doors, one claw extended. Faster. Troy's lungs burned. His legs screamed. The engine wash was so hot he could feel his hair singeing. 15 feet. 10 feet. 5 feet. Thorvin's claw wrapped around Troy's arm and yanked him through the blast doors. They slammed shut automatically, sealing them off from the inferno. Through the viewport, they watched Pod 12 shoot into space, carrying its deadly cargo away from the ship. Troy collapsed against the wall, gasping. His clothes were smoking. His face felt sunburned times 10. But he was alive. That, he wheezed, was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Thorvin's laugh rumbled through the corridor. And the bravest. Captain Hayes arrived with the medic. Mr. Brennan, you're going to medical. That's an order. Yes, ma'am. Troy didn't have the energy to argue. As they carried him to the medical bay on a stretcher, Troy saw the passengers lining the corridors. They were clapping. Some were crying. Beth had tears streaming down her face as her drone captured everything. You saved us, she said. Again. Troy managed a weak smile. Just doing what anyone would do. No, Thorvin walked beside the stretcher, his voice firm. What you did was extraordinary. And I will make sure the galaxy knows it. Through the viewport, Troy saw the flash as Pod 12 detonated safely in the distance. A brief star, then nothing. The ship was safe. Everyone aboard was going to live. Troy closed his eyes and finally let himself rest. Troy spent 2 days in the medical bay recovering from radiation exposure and second-degree burns. The doctor, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patel, told him he was lucky to be alive. Troy figured she was probably right. On the 3rd day, Captain Hayes visited him. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept since the incident. How are you feeling? She asked. Like I got barbecued and then run over by a cargo hauler. But I'll live. Troy shifted in the bed, wincing. Did you find out anything about Veller? Who he was working with? Hayes pulled up a chair. That's actually why I'm here. We found encrypted communications in his quarters. He was part of a group called the Preservation Coalition. They've been operating in secret for years, trying to sabotage human integration into galactic society. Let me guess. They think humans are taking over? Exactly. They've been behind at least a dozen incidents across various sectors. Destroyed trade deals, sabotaged diplomatic missions, even a few assassinations. Hayes leaned forward. Troy, your actions didn't just save this ship. You exposed an entire conspiracy. Galactic security is picking up coalition members across 5 systems as we speak. Troy let that sink in. And here I thought I was just trying not to die in a reactor explosion. Hayes smiled. Well, you did that too. The Draconian High Council has been in contact. They want to speak with you when we reach port. Me? Why? Because you and General Thorvin just proved that human-alien cooperation isn't just possible, it's powerful. That scares people like Veller, but it gives hope to everyone else. After Hayes left, Thorvin visited. The old dragon had to duck to fit through the medical bay door. He carried something wrapped in cloth. You should not be out of bed, Thorvin rumbled. Yeah, well, you shouldn't be squeezing into human-sized doorways, but here we are. Troy grinned. What's that? Thorvin carefully unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a medal, old and tarnished. The medal was inscribed with draconian symbols Troy couldn't read. This was given to me 40 years ago for valor in combat. I want you to have it. General, I can't. You saved 3,000 lives, Troy Brennan. You crawled into fire twice. You stopped a terrorist. If that is not valor, I do not know what is. Thorvin placed the medal on the bedside table. Besides, I have carried it long enough. It is time someone worthy had it. Troy felt something catch in his throat. Thank you. No, thank you. You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. What's that? Hope. A week later, the Celestial Horizon docked at Barrier Station. Troy was cleared for discharge, though Dr. Patel made him promise to take it easy for at least a month. As he walked down the boarding ramp, he was shocked to find a crowd waiting. News reporters. Camera drones. Station officials. And right at the front, Beth, Kevin, and at least 20 other passengers from the ship. There he is. Beth shouted. The crowd erupted in applause. A reporter shoved a microphone in Troy's face. Mr. Brennan, how does it feel to be a hero? I'm not a hero. I'm just a mechanic who got lucky. You saved 3,000 people and exposed a galactic conspiracy. That's more than luck. Troy spotted Thorvin standing off to the side, trying to avoid the crowd. Their eyes met, and the old dragon gave him a nod. That small gesture meant more than all the applause combined. The interview lasted 20 minutes. Then station security had to escort Troy through the crowd to awaiting transport. He was heading to a hotel to rest, or so he thought. Instead, the transport took him to the station's diplomatic sector. The fancy part where ambassadors and government officials worked. Troy looked down at his worn jeans and faded jacket. I think there's been a mistake. I don't belong here. The driver, a professional-looking woman, smiled. No mistake, Mr. Brennan. The Draconian delegation specifically requested your presence. They led him to a conference room with windows overlooking the station's main docking ring. Ships of every size and species came and went, a constant dance of commerce and travel. Thorvin was already there, along with 3 other Draconians in formal robes. Troy Brennan, one of them said. She was older than Thorvin, her scales a deep purple. I am Council Member Sarita. We have been following your story with great interest. Ma'am? Troy had no idea if that was the right way to address a Draconian Council member, but it seemed safe. Please sit. We have a proposition for you. For the next hour they laid out their plan. The Draconian government was launching a new initiative called the Skybridge Project. The goal was to rebuild their civilian fleet using combined human and Draconian engineering. They wanted to prove that cooperation between species wasn't just possible, it was better than working alone. We want General Thorvin to lead the engineering division, Sarita explained. He has agreed on one condition. That you serve as his co-director. Troy nearly fell out of his chair. Me? I'm a contract mechanic. I don't have the credentials to. You have something better than credentials, Thorvin interrupted. You have instinct, vision, and the courage to act when others hesitate. That is what this project needs. The position pays 200,000 credits annually, another council member added. Full benefits, housing, and access to the best engineering facilities in the sector. Troy's head spun. 200,000 credits. That was more money than he'd make in 5 years of contract work. He could pay off his debts, help his sister with her medical bills, maybe even buy that workshop he'd always dreamed about. But more than the money, it was the opportunity. To build something that mattered. To prove that the walls between species could come down. I have one condition, Troy said. The council members exchanged glances. Name it. We hire everyone. Humans, Draconians, Centauri, Viridians, whoever has the skills and wants to work. No discrimination. No quotas. Just the best people for the job. Thorvin's eyes gleamed with approval. Sarita smiled. Agreed. 3 months later, Troy stood in the main assembly hall of Skybridge Station, watching the controlled chaos of 100 engineers from a dozen different species working together. The prototype ship, christened the Phoenix Rising, was taking shape in the central dock. Beth had joined them as communications director. Kevin ran the maintenance division. Even some of the passengers from the Celestial Horizon had signed on, drawn by the chance to be part of something historic. Troy walked the assembly floor, checking welds and inspecting systems. A young Draconian engineer called him over to look at a power coupling design. A human technician asked his opinion on a hull reinforcement pattern. A Centauri specialist wanted to run a new idea past him. This was what scared people like Veller. Not human dominance but human cooperation. The idea that when different species worked together, they could build something greater than any of them could alone. Thorvin found him near the end of shift, standing by the viewport and watching the Phoenix Rising gleam under the construction lights. Beautiful, is she not? The old dragon asked. Yeah. Hard to believe we're really doing this. I told you once that you gave me back hope. But it is more than that. Thorvin placed a claw on Troy's shoulder. You gave me back purpose. A reason to build instead of merely existing. Troy thought about that first day on the Celestial Horizon. How a simple gesture, giving up a seat, had led to all of this. You know what's funny? If that businessman hadn't complained about you taking up space, I might never have noticed you. Then perhaps we should thank him for being an ass. Troy laughed. Yeah, maybe we should. His comm buzzed. A message from Captain Hayes. She was bringing the Celestial Horizon through the sector next week and wanted to visit, see what they'd built. More messages followed. A request from a university to speak about cross-species engineering. An invitation to a conference on galactic cooperation. 3 different news outlets wanting interviews. Troy ignored them all for now. There'd be time for that later. Right now he had a ship to build. As first shift ended and second shift began, the assembly hall remained alive with activity. The Phoenix Rising grew larger each day, piece by piece, bolt by bolt. And with it grew something else. A bridge between species that had been enemies. A foundation for a future where working together was normal, not exceptional. Troy walked back to his office, his burned hands mostly healed now, his radiation exposure a fading memory. On his desk sat Thorvin's old medal, polished and mounted. Next to it, a photo from that first day when he'd given up a seat to a stranger. He thought he was just being decent. Turned out, decency could change everything. His calm buzzed again. This time he answered. It was Thorvin. Troy, you need to see this. We just received an application from a Centauri engineer. She says she wants to work somewhere that values skills over politics. What's her name? Lissa. She worked with Veller's company before. Left when she found out what they were really doing. Troy smiled. Hire her. If she's got the skills, she's got the job. My thoughts exactly. This is just the beginning, my friend. Yeah. Troy looked out at the phoenix rising, at the engineers of different species working side by side building tomorrow. I think you're right. Somewhere in a maximum security prison, Veller watched a news report about the Skybridge project's success. His plan had failed. The conspiracy had been exposed. And the future he feared was arriving anyway. But he wasn't alone in his cell. A shadowy figure stood in the corner, unseen by the cameras. Your failure has taught us valuable lessons, the figure whispered. Next time we'll be smarter, more careful. Humanity's integration will be stopped. But even as the figure spoke, another Phoenix-class ship was being commissioned. Then another. The bridge between species was growing stronger every day. And it had all started with one human mechanic giving up his seat.